In this tutorial, we'll build a bulletproof HTML email template in the form of a password reset transactional email. So for this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to lay out your HTML for email to make it match across all email clients. Our email template will have a logo, banner, text, button, social media, and links at the bottom of the template as our sections that we'll lay out in our text editor. Our HTML email template will also be dark mode friendly, as you can see here in dark mode on my iPhone inside of the Gmail app. As a best practice for dark mode, if you have a darker logo, you can put a border around it to make sure that there's good contrast. I might have made this border a little too thin, as you can see, so just keep that in mind while you're designing for dark mode. So in the description of this video will be the starter files download that I've created to get us started with the tutorial, which has an index.html file as well as the image folder, including all of the images we'll use to build the template. You'll notice that the button is actually an image, so I'm going to cover the difference between a button with HTML and an image briefly later in the course. But for now, let's take a look at how it's going to render across 123 email clients that are provided inside of this test. And let me tell you one other thing I could have changed with this simple design is that the banner image has a lot of white space off to the side, so old versions of Outlook are showing the image at a larger size because they're not able to recognize the white space. Aside from that, if we take a look at all of these email clients, we're not only going to have all of the elements appear for us, but the spacing is going to be consistent with the way that we lay out our HTML. So I'll speed through the rest of these, but feel free to slow the video down to get a better look at which email clients were tested for here. And before we get started, let me briefly mention the button, because I mentioned we're going to be using an image instead of HTML. So to lay out a button properly, it takes a lot of HTML. So I have a course, HTML Email Mastery. Inside of the course, we have a lesson basically creating a single button, which is the length of this entire tutorial with HTML and CSS, as well as something called VML for Outlook to make sure that the buttons render properly across all email clients. So be sure to check out the course curriculum so you can get a better idea of what's included in the 16-hour course. For this tutorial though, I wanted to make it render on as many email clients as possible with the minimal amount of code, which is what we're going to do by using an image for the button instead of HTML. Let's go ahead and see what I've included for us inside of index.html and the image folder inside of our text editor. So I'm going to be using the free program Visual Studio Code, and this makes it easy for us to access the images and open up the index.html file. If you're not familiar with Visual Studio Code, you can check out a lesson on my channel. I'm going to be using the live server extension, so I'll hit go live in the lower right hand corner, and that's going to open up the project in Google Chrome. So whatever we add to it, we'll be able to see live with autosave. So if I just add a heading here and type out hello, we'll see it come up in Google Chrome. If you're new to HTML, by the way, there's a lesson for the text editor as well as crash courses for HTML and CSS included in my HTML Email Mastery course. Following along with the beginner tutorials here on YouTube are a really great way to get introduced to email though before committing to the course. So let's go over to Visual Studio Code and I'm going to run through what I've included for us already. So from the top, we have our HTML5 document type, the HTML element, then the head section where we have a basic HTML boilerplate instead of one that's specific to email with the character set, Internet Explorer compatibility, initial scale 1 for mobile devices, a title, which we don't really need for email, but I like to include anyways. A title is only recommended if we're viewing our email template on the web. Then I have some internal styles added here in the internal style sheet with some resets such as removing all margin from the body so we have a full canvas without any space on the edges. Then border spacing 0 for tables, padding 0 for table data tags, border 0 for images, then 2 classes I've included here which we're going to style, as well as Poppins, which is a font from fonts.google.com, which is what we're going to use throughout the design. Then moving into the body section of the document, which is where we'll actually add our HTML, which will display in our browser and in email clients, I have the center tag with the class wrapper, which is what we're going to use to center our template. So even though this is an HTML4 tag, it's still valid for email for simplicity here because we're trying to use as little code as possible. Then the table tag with class main is going to be where we're actually seeing the white space. So that'll be the 600 pixel width template. Then the 3 HTML comments that I have started for us with logo, body, and footer are going to represent the 3 main sections of the template, with the body being the white section. Then, of course, we have the closing, table, and center tags. So we're going to start off each one of these 3 sections the same with a table row tag, which goes in order after table inside of it, followed by a table data tag inside of the table row. We're going to have a style attribute for the table data tag. Then inside of that, we'll have an additional table with a width attribute and style attribute. So once you have all that typed out with your right angle brackets and brackets, just hit enter. So we'll have all 3 tags added for us with the Emmet feature in Visual Studio Code. For the style attribute, we're going to include padding 0 for the table data tag, which we already have in our internal style sheet, but we're going to be including that in line as well. For the table width, it'll be the same as above with 100%. Then for style, we'll have border spacing 0, which is also in our internal style sheet. Then let's add some space in between our opening and closing table tags, and we'll have one more set of table row and table data tags. So each one of our 3 main sections is going to start with this code with the table row, table data, table, then a new set of table row and table data tags, with each one of those inner table rows representing a single line of content. So we'll have the logo in one, the banner image, the text blocks, button, and the rest, each in the inner table row. So let's paste it out for the body and footer section as well. Just make sure that you have your indentation the same for each. Next, let's add back that content in the form of a heading inside of the inner table data tag. So I'll just include an H1 and write hello, so we can start to see the email template take form as we style the first 2 elements, which I've included for us, which have the wrapper and the main classes. So for the wrapper class, let's go up to that CSS declaration, and I'm going to include width 100%, which is going to be the gray shade we saw in the finished version. So that's going to span the entire browser or the entire email client. Then I'm also going to add table layout fixed inside of this CSS declaration to make it so the table with the class main stays within the center tag. So basically, when we size the screen down or when we're looking at the template in mobile version email clients, there's no chance that the table will span outside of the center element. Let's also add a background color here. So we can add background color, and I'm going to add that gray shade, which is the hex value E1, E5, E8. So now we have that gray shade displaying, and we could also add some padding here. So I'll add padding on the bottom, while we'll add padding on the top within our HTML. So I'll add padding bottom, 60 pixels, and we'll be able to see that space now underneath the hello text. Now for the main table or the main class within that table element, we're also going to give this a width of 100% internally, just like we did to the inline styling using an attribute. And I'm going to give it a max width of 600 pixels, which will contain the template within that 600 pixel range, while keeping a width of 100% under 600 pixels, making it mobile friendly. And let's also change the text color. So I'm going to make it a off black gray shade instead of just having it plain black here in the white section of the template. And the hex value for that is 44413D. So if I go back to the heading that we added and remove that color, you'll be able to see it go from all black to the gray shade. Now for our font family, let's include that Poppins font from Google Fonts. And I'm going to include Arial, Helvetica, Sans Serif as the fallback fonts in case an email client doesn't respond to the Poppins font style. All of the text will be centered, so let's add text align center. We'll be adding that inline as well. And to see the outline of the template, we can add a background color here, but we're not going to include it internally because we're only going to have it for the center section where it says forgot your password instead of the logo and footer section too. So I'm going to remove this and we'll just leave it as we have it without a background color. Let's start to add some styling to this first section with the logo. So we'll need to add some padding to separate the logo from the top of the template and the white section underneath. So let's add some padding both to the top and bottom. So I'll add padding of 25 pixels on top, 0 left right, and 20 pixels bottom. Then I'm also going to add text align center, which will take care of centering our image because we're going to have it inside of a link or anchor tag. So we'll have the A tag, then the image tag inside of that. And this, of course, is going to be for that logo image that we saw. So for the attributes, let's include source, alt for alternative text, width, and style. So just hit enter with all of this typed out, and we can add a link. So you can add a link to your website or whatever is relevant for the logo going to the website, or you can leave a hashtag to make it blank if you don't have a link just yet. Then for the image source, that's going to be the image file. So img/w3newbie.png. And there we have the logo appearing. So let's resize that by giving it a width of 190 or 190 pixels. We don't have to include pixels with the width attribute. And border 0, which we'll add to all of our images to make sure that email clients don't add a border to them. For the alternative text in email, it's important to describe the image in case there's a problem with the image displaying. So we'll see that text appear. You can also add the title attribute, which would display when hovering over the image. So with the logo section complete, let's drop down to the white section, which is the bulk of our content for the email template, which I've called the body with the HTML comment. So for this section, let's add our background color to the first table data tag, which we're going to have set to white, which is all Fs as the hex value. Then let's start to style the first table data tag for our image with some padding. So we're going to have padding of 0 top, 0 left right, and 20 pixels on the bottom underneath the image. And I'm also going to add text align center because all of our images will be wrapped in links, even though this image will take up the full width. And actually, this is going to be the same HTML with an exception of the 20 pixels bottom for each one of our content rows. So the content row for the password, the text underneath, and the button. So what we'll do is let me just change this padding to 0 so we can start from fresh for each content row. And I'll also include an HTML comment to make it easy for us to recognize the different content rows. So this will be the image, and I'll change this. So let's for each one. So let's paste it in underneath, and this will be the heading. Then the next one will be for the first bit of text where it says that's okay, it happens. So text 1, then text 2 will be the click the button below text. So text 2, and underneath that we'll have the button content row. And the reason for separating it like this with a new table row for each block of content is so we have our spacing exactly the same across all of our testable email clients. So again, we have the image up top with this table row. We have the heading for the next table row or content row, the first bit of text, the second bit of text, then the reset your password button. So we'll be filling out the content inside of the table data tag for each one of these table rows. So let's start our banner image with the anchor tag, then the image tag inside of that with the source attribute, the alt attribute, width, and style like we did previously for our image. For the link, I'm going to leave it blank with a hashtag. Then the source is going to be img/reset.jpg. And the width of this image, we're going to contain it inside of the template with the same width set for the max width of the main class. So that's going to be 600 or 600 pixels. But to make it responsive, what we're going to do is, after I add border 0, which will include for all images, I'm going to give this a max width because right now it's going to be spanning outside of the template. So we'll set a max width of 100%. So it's contained inside of the main table. So now if we flex it up and down, we'll find that it's responsive. So now let's move on to the next content row, which is going to be the heading where it says forgot your password. So let's drop down inside of that table data tag for this section. And we're going to have padding for all of these values. So we only need one. I'll just leave it at padding 0. And we're going to use a heading 1 for the heading we use with the style attribute. And let's type in forgot your password so we can see the size of the text before we change it with the heading 1. So there we see the text and it's kind of large. So I'm going to change this to font size 25 pixels. And with text inside of tables and just on the web in general, we're going to have some space around it that's unwanted. So we're going to use margin 0 to get rid of that space for all of our text, so we can have full control by using padding around the elements instead of having different email clients respond differently to the inherent margin with the text. So now let's move on to the next section, which is going to be our "That's okay, it happens" text appearing underneath "Forgot your password." So we're going to use a heading. We could use a paragraph, but we'll keep it semantic by adding a smaller heading before we go on to a paragraph for the next bit of text. So you can type out that text. I've just pasted it in. And for the heading 3, we're going to give it a different font size. So you can leave it as bold like this. That will look pretty good. But I'm going to change the styling to match the original. So I'll add font size 18 pixels. Then I'm going to give it a font weight of 400, which is the regular non-bold font weight. And just like the other heading, I'm going to remove the spacing with margin 0. So that looks pretty good, but I'm actually going to change this to 16 pixels to match the original, and we're going to need some padding. So I'll add padding of 15 pixels on top, and we'll take care of the bottom spacing when we add the next bit of text. So let's take a look at that. And I actually forgot the spacing above the heading, so I'm going to add that to the bottom of the image with 20 pixels. 20 pixels on the bottom, so 0 top, 0 left, right, 20 pixels bottom to match the finished version. So now let's include the click the button text. So we're going to use a paragraph tag for this inside of the table data tag. And I'm going to give this a font size of 16 pixels. Then in case a screen size is small enough to where it wraps to the next line, or if there's more text, we'll include a line height of 28 pixels to separate the text sum to sort of match the styling of the text that's above it, so the text isn't too close together vertically. And of course, we're going to include margin 0 to get rid of the spacing around the text. For this paragraph text, we'll include some padding both on top and bottom to separate it from the previous text and the button. So we'll add 5 pixels on top, 0 left, right, and 15 pixels on the bottom, but we can also include padding for the button underneath that as well. So let's move on to the button now, which will be similar to the other images that we added, which is going to be inside of a link. So we'll add the anchor tag, and inside of that we'll have the image tag with the attributes source, alt, width, and style. And I'm going to leave this link blank. The image is going to be img/reset-button.jpg. Then we can change the width to 200 for 200 pixels. And for style, we'll add border 0, of course. But I'm also going to include max width 200 pixels to make sure that no email clients make the image bigger than 200 pixels. Then for padding, let's add 10 pixels on top, 0 left, right, with 50 pixels on the bottom to add some space with the white background. So with the addition of our button, we'll be matching the finished version down to the bottom of the white space. So let's move on to the footer section, which includes the social media icons. Let's start off by adding some styling to this table data tag, the inner table data, to add some space above the social media icons. So I'll add padding of 45 pixels on top, 0 left, right, 0 bottom, because we've already added that internally, and text align center. And all of our images for the social media icons are going to be pretty much the same, except for the image URLs, or the image file name. So let's start it off with a link, img, source, alt, width, and style. I'll leave the link blank with a hashtag, but you could add your social media link if you like. img/facebook.png for this first one. Then we'll include border 0 and the width. So you can see the original size. We're going to make it 40 pixels. And let's just copy this Facebook one and paste it in 4 different times so we have all 5 social media icons. Then we can change the image file names accordingly. So after Facebook, we have Instagram. Then we have Twitter, or Twitter X, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Okay, so with that, we'll have all of our social media icons matching the original with the same size. So let's move on to the text that appears underneath them. So we could start off a new table row and table data tag, but I'm going to cheat because the text is sort of spaced apart. Let's just include our paragraphs here in the same TD tag. So we'll have our paragraph tag with a style attribute and a link inside of that with a style attribute as well. Then for the paragraph styling, we'll include some padding on top. So 5 pixels on top, then 0 left, right, 0 bottom. For the link, I'm going to leave it blank with the hashtag. The text for the link is going to be, let me just move in here, www.w3newbie.com. Then let's bring that up off to the left so we can see the styling changes. So let's remove the underline first with text decoration none. So text decoration none. Then the color, let's make it plain black because the background's a little darker than that white section where we had an off black shade. Then for the font size, I'm going to make this 15 pixels, so slightly smaller than the text that we had in the white section. And I'll add text transform uppercase to make it uppercase like the finished version, with some letter spacing to give it sort of a cool design. So let's use 1 pixel for that. So we should be matching the finished version now with that same sizing and letter spacing, except for the finished version may be a bit lighter in its color. So let's move on to the address underneath that. So we'll add a new paragraph tag, and I'm going to give this a font size of 14 pixels to make it slightly smaller than the website address. We'll give it the black color once again with all zeros for the hex value. And I'm going to show you a trick here. So some email clients try to turn street addresses into links. So in an email client, it might be underlined or even have a link color when we don't want it to have one. So if we add ampersand hashtag 8203, so ampersand hashtag 8203 semicolon with no spaces accounted for this, will prevent email clients from trying to convert it into a link because it creates an invisible line break that we can't see, but the email client will render. That's one of the many sort of tips and tricks for rendering and troubleshooting that I teach in my HTML email mastery course. And let me just use CSS to make this uppercase like the finished version. So text transform uppercase. Okay, so once that's added, we should be matching the original without any additional line spacing for the address. So let's move on to the subscriber preferences link, which will be similar to what we did with the website address. So we'll have that inside of a paragraph tag to start a new line with the style attribute as well. And I'm going to add 14 pixels for the paragraph sizing, which we could include in the link styling too, which we did above, but I'll just leave it like that. And subscriber preferences. Then for the link styling, let's add text decoration none. We'll give it a black color again to get rid of the purple or blue shade. Then text transform uppercase. And I'm going to share one other tip here, which is using color inherit. So once in a while, email clients or certain email clients will try to convert links into their own color, like a blue shade, even if we have the color set. So what color inherit will do is for the link color, it's going to revert back to the parent element that it's inside of. So it will basically inherit the color from the paragraph, which you may remember we have that color set above, which is the gray shade. Or we could just set that black color again inherently to the paragraph element surrounding the link. Okay, so that concludes all of our HTML and CSS for this bulletproof HTML email template. So now what I want to talk to you about is inlining our styling for sending the email to email clients. So up here, we don't have these styles in line for the wrapper, the main class, and there's also the body class that's included in the internal style sheet. So most of our CSS is inlined. We could also remove the HTML comments that we've included. And just in case you think you missed anything, let me just scroll through the rest of this so you can pause if you need to match up your HTML and CSS. So everything looks good, but in order to send the email template, as I was saying, we want everything to be in line. We also want our images to be uploaded to the web. So right now we're using local image files. So we have the image folder with twitter.png. Instead of having the images online with a website address, which we can access like yourwebsite.com/myimage.png, so the image is actually online. So you need to have your images online before you actually send your email template. So let me give you some free resources so you can get your images online and then you can do some tests with your email template. So a good free one is imgbb.com. You can also just do a Google search for free image hosting where you can get a direct link to the image. Another resource is just any free account that you can get with an email service provider like MailChimp.com, where you can upload your image content and get direct links for your email templates. There's also, for advanced, just do a search for adding your image content to MailChimp in your free ESP account. And both of these methods, as well as using the GitHub website, I include in a complete lesson in my HTML email course. IMGBB is probably going to be your best source for something really simple, though, that you can get set up quickly with your direct links. So let me get back to inlining our CSS. So I mentioned that we don't have the main and wrapper CSS inlined. I also didn't include the body margin 0 inline, but everything else we have inlined there. So you can add that with the style attribute to the body as well as the CSS to the wrapper, which is all of this CSS and the CSS for the main class. Just use the style attribute like we did with other elements. Alternatively, you can simply use a CSS inliner like I have up with MailChimp. So just do a Google search for MailChimp CSS inliner. And once you hit convert with the CSS inliner, you'll find that we now have that body style, the wrapper and main styling added to the HTML elements. So you can use this code to send an email test to your own email to see how it works. And let me show you a free program so you can send that test. So if you go to putsmail.com and create a free account, so you can see that I'm logged into my free account here, hit create a new test email, then just add the email addresses you want to send your test to, a subject line, paste in all of our HTML code. So if you don't already have it inlined using that MailChimp tool, just select Move My CSS Inline, I'm Not a Robot, and send the email. That, you may remember, is what I used to receive this email to my Gmail address from Putsmail to test how the email template will look, both here in Gmail for the web and in dark mode on my iPhone. So with that, I want to thank you for watching the tutorial and participating in the tutorial if you coded along with me. Remember to check out the curriculum and the preview video for my HTML email mastery course for more information, as the course is much more in depth with it being 16 hours long. So once again, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video, subscribe, and turn on your notifications. I'll see you in the next tutorial.